Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to the Niche Cast. This is our weekly podcast going deep into Aotearoa sporting matters. It's just what we love to do. We love a bit of Aotearoa sport, and we love to have a little chit chat, not just a chit, but a little chit chat about Aotearoa sport,
Both
a
of them.
little kōrero, a little yarn about Kiwi sporting matters, and it's a bit complicated at the moment because the Blackcaps lost, the White Ferns still suck, the Kiwis kind of have situations getting a bit precarious. Things, and of course, if you go deeper into all these New Zealand sports teams, football, Ferns, All Whites, there's a fair bit of losing, but in keeping with the theme of last week's podcast, which is still the theme of this week's podcast, these are strange times. And these strange times, we've got the New Zealand Breakers giving us some sporting joy this week. So shout out to the Breakers. They had a good win over the Brisbane Bullets, and we'll be touching on that in a jiffy. But this is what we do. We just chat about Aotearoa sport, and we're from theniche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sport if that's your thing. If you like to have a little good old read on the interwebs, join us, theniche-case.com, where we have a New Zealand versus Sri Lanka test debrief. We've got the New Zealand Women Warriors signings tracker. So I've got two yarns there, breaking down all the Warriors women signings. We've also got the three themes of Warriors recruitment and development, which goes pretty deep into what the Warriors are doing this summer, or what they've been doing heading into the summer. We've got the football department firing on all cylinders. We've got the National League previews, and we just need to check in here with old mate, because I did advertise that the newsletter would feature some National League yarns. And I checked in with our newsletter, and there were no National League yarns. So how are you structuring the National League football? Because we'll go behind the curtain here. I did share on Twitter and Facebook that we're going to do it. We're going to have some National League stuff in our Monday newsletter, but it wasn't there. So I imagine that you are going to be whipping up some National League deep dives for our website, theniche-case.com. Is that correct?
I will, and I will also have stuff in the emails on. So I guess I'll just stick to the same plans as I did last year, which is like a team of the week for one of the leagues on Monday, team of the week for the other one, whichever one I haven't finished up. Like whichever one I finish first gets to go on the Monday one. The write-ups of the games, and notes from them, and goal scorers and tallies and whatever, and the highlights all over the social accounts and whatnot, and integrated through the other stuff. But surprisingly, I was actually quite up to date with my preview stuff, so I got it done early, and the National League just hasn't started yet. So if you're wondering why there was nothing on the weekend, it's because there were no games. They start next weekend. So I was that far ahead. I got the previews done instead of 3 days before. I got it done like 10 days before. So I was pretty proud of myself for that, and this just justifies that even further.
I'm switched on today, aren't I? I can barely get some words out, and we're jumping the gun on the National League coverage. But you can head over to our website, theniche-case.com, and check out the men's and women's National League previews. Most of the stuff, like, you're not finding it elsewhere in Aotearoa media. They don't care about the National League. They don't care about the insights, the deep cuts of Warriors recruitment and development. And I'd also suggest the only Warriors woman headlines you see are when there's a black fern involved. So the Warriors have signed a black fern, Shakira Baker. So that got a headline in the mainstream media. But of course, the Warriors have signed a bunch of other players who actually play rugby league, including a very intriguing youngster who I want to talk about later, Tyra Wetere. But there's a bunch of rugby league ladies signed to the Warriors who don't get any coverage. But that's what we do at the Niche Case. That's who we are. We just love Aotearoa sport, and we go deep because a lot of other people love rugby league, they love football, and they also love cricket, where we have comprehensive Blackcaps coverage. We're covering how stink the White Ferns are, and we've got a bit of domestic cricket stuff there for you Interesting times for domestic cricket because we do have a change in the schedule as well. Ford Trophy starting this summer. And if I was better prepared, instead of just coming into the podcast after writing a couple thousand words about the Blackcaps, I might be able to give you some lads who this might be relevant to. Because off the top of my head, I feel like there's Will Clark for Central Districts, very good one-day player. Christian Clark, very good one-day bowler and cricketer. Matt Fisher, seamer for Northern Districts, another very good one-day cricketer. So the change in format from Plunket Shield starting this summer to Ford Trophy starting this summer, I think it's going to be very interesting for some domestic cricketers, even someone like Nathan Smith, who off the top of my head, he might not be as good in one-day cricket as he is in the other formats. I'm just going to double check that before I talk some bull caca. Yes, Nathan Smith. He averages 25.8 in first class bowling. He averages 23.4 in T20 bowling. He averages 31.9 in one-day bowling. So now you can see, like, Nathan Smith is one of the best domestic seamers who everyone's talking about as possibly entering the Blackcaps mixer this summer. But the change in the schedule means that the Ford Trophy stuff is first, which means the lads who are very good at one-day cricket, or someone like Nathan Smith who can dominate Ford Trophy, it just changes the focus of the domestic season a wee bit. And I am talking myself into a yarn about it. This is the brainstorming session, and so I might do a yarn about that, a written yarn for our website over the next few days. We'll see how we go.
Why have they changed the schedule? Did they say?
I don't care, but I do think they had a story about just matching up with the Blackcaps kind of schedule more.
Right. So playing Plunket Shield leading into
the England tests.
England are coming here, aren't they? Yeah. So I guess that, yeah, okay, that just makes enough sense.
But that's just
Fair
what
enough.
we do here at the Niche Cage as well. We're not here to try and fix things. We're not here to try and complain or come up with new ideas. We're just here to tell you what happened and offer our insights into stuff that's happened. And it is what it is. There's Ford Trophy to start the summer, and there are a bunch of lads who are very good at one-day cricket, and there are some other key emerging cricketers who haven't dominated Ford Trophy yet, who could dominate Ford Trophy and keep themselves in that mix. So stay tuned for any domestic cricket yarns on our website, theniche-case.com. And of course, we have our newsletter, the Monday newsletter coming out on a Monday and the Friday newsletter coming out on a Friday. Funny that. thenichecase.substack.com. So sign up there because you're just getting a whole lot of Aotearoa sport through the newsletter format. And this is just stuff that builds out podcast yarns, stuff that builds out the website yarns, and just really important Aotearoa sporting nuggets. I think the best plug for the newsletter right now is Smashing Hands, because we've got two newsletters titled Smashing Hands. We've got Smashing Hands and we've got Smashing Hands Part 2, both of which revolve around William O'Rourke smashing hands. He did it against Australia, did it against Sri Lanka. That's who he is, that's what he does, and that's how we title our newsletters. So shout out to the newsletter, shout out to everyone. Subscribe to the newsletter via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. And if you are signed up to the newsletter, you can upgrade to a paid Substack subscription to access our bonus podcast every week on Substack and or Patreon. Coming out every Thursday, bonus podcast for the folks who are funding our mahi. And speaking of Patreon, shout out to Scott Dalzell, who has joined the Patreon whānau, latest addition to the Patreon whānau. We went a bit quiet there, but we got a new member. We got a new homie who is generous enough to fund the Niche Case. So if you do enjoy the podcast, if you do enjoy the website yarns and or the newsletter yarns, just the general Aotearoa sporting coverage that you don't really find anywhere else, let's be honest, the rest of it's kind of shit. You can support us through Patreon or with a paid Substack subscription, or you can just make a one-off donation through Buy Me a Coffee, all of which goes really hard. But there is the bonus podcast every week for Patreon and folks with a paid Substack subscription. We appreciate everyone's support. That's pretty much how the Niche Case is funded at the moment. So once again, if you do enjoy this coverage or you want to help us out, head on over to those platforms, do your thing, and we will be internally grateful. And we might get in touch with Papatua Nuku and Ranganui and send some positive vibrations your way. That is a fair amount of dribble to start the podcast. So let's get a bit of mindfulness.
Well, good thing then I have a bit of mindfulness ready to go from Mr. Leonard Cohen, who apparently it was his 90th birthday recently. So it's not, I don't know, he's dead. So I don't know if you get to keep counting birthdays after you're dead. But anniversary of his birth, I suppose. I saw that, and then I also was doing some Flying Kiwis research because Ava Collins scored a goal over in Denmark, and I was looking at her Instagram because I was trying to look at the different, first of all, to see if she'd mentioned anything about scoring a goal, which hadn't happened yet, but hopefully she's looking at our Instagram, which has the video of her scoring a goal. So, but I also was trying to find out what Ali Green's up to. And there was, Ava Collins did a picture of her having grabbing a cup of tea with Malia Steinmetz and Ali Green and herself. So the three Kiwis over in Denmark at the moment, which is pretty cool. And then as part of that photo dump, there was randomly a thing of Leonard Cohen. And so I saw that, but I didn't use the quote that was on her one. I used a different quote, which is, where are we here? If you don't become the ocean, you'll be seasick every day. Mr. Leonard Cohen. So shout out to him on being born 90 years ago and then doing all the stuff he did while he was alive. And the legacy continues.
If you don't become the ocean, you'll be seasick every day.
That's it. I don't know. Yeah, how do I refer this? Be one with your surroundings, I suppose, is another way to say that. Don't fight the surroundings. Don't try to whatever the opposite of becoming the ocean is. Don't try to be an island when you're supposed to be the ocean. I don't know. You might have to help me out with this one.
But a go with the flow.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Adapting. Another word that comes to mind is just contentment, being content.
Yeah.
If you're
so taking things for what they are, not trying to be something else when that wouldn't be going with the flow.
Boy, we are on fire today with the dribble. Righto. There is
enough dribble and you get an ocean, so
yep. And then because there's so much dribble, we are the ocean, so we are not seasick.
There we go, we saved it.
I don't know about that. There has been a bit of boxing. So there was a boxing scrap over the weekend where Mr. Dubois defeated Mr. Joshua. And I just want to get your thoughts on that fight because Joseph Parker's loitering around the situation. Joseph Parker has been rather resurgent in recent years. Maybe the last year or so, he's had a couple of wins. Let me just make sure again. I'm not talking bullcacker. He has had 5 wins in a row. He did kind of drop down to fights like he fought Jack Massey, Fainga Opelu, Simon Keane. No idea who those blokes are. But then he had a win over Deontay Wilder and Zheli Zhang, both of whom are like in the upper echelons of the heavyweight division. So I'm just curious, do you have any read on how that Joseph Parker's situation is and what the Dubois win over Anthony Joshua means for Joseph Parker, and or any other boxing thoughts? Because there have been a few Kiwi boxers in action over the past few weeks as well. So a little boxing chicken to save us from the dribble of the introduction and actually get into some sporting yarns where we really go full banger hundies.
Yeah, this is the bit where we become the ocean. Bookmark that Whainga Apello name because I might swing back around to that in a second. But as far as Joseph Parker goes, I I mean, he was doing some commentary for one of the channels apparently for that for the Joshua Dubois fight where Dubois just absolutely munted him. He knocked him down three times, and Joshua just looked awful. He's just terrible. Like he got into that state, in the last round of fights where a guy knows that he's losing and he just lets his hands go. It's like no thought of defense. It's like knockout or bust. He was doing that in like the third or fourth round against Dubois, who was supposed to be someone he was going to comfortably outclass because Dubois himself was comfortably outclassed when he fought against Alexander Usyk, like a lot more outclassed against Usyk than Joshua had been, who also lost to Usyk twice, but was more competitive in those games, in those bouts. But yeah, no, Joshua just had one of those days like he did against Andrew Ruiz the first time, where just he just didn't seem to be at the races. So not good at all for his reputation, and it means that Dubois can defends, whatever, retains the belt that Usyk had to give up in order to have a rematch with Tyson Fury. So one of them was up for a mandatory defense, and he wanted the unification, and politics got in the way, so he had to give up one of the bouts, which Dubois then went and claimed, beating someone else. Might have been the Croatian dude. I can't remember exactly, but then now he's defended against Joshua. It was sort of one of those ones where it fell to him quite conveniently, but now he's beaten a former champion to defend it. He suddenly gets to move himself up into those upper echelons where Joseph Parker's trying to be. I don't like Parker immediately did the thing that Parker always does, and it's like, yeah, mate, I'll fight you. Yeah, let's go. Let's have it. But that's not really gonna, I don't think the timelines work for that because Parker's hasn't fought since about March or May or something like that, but it sounds like his next fight will be most likely the sort of like main undercard bout on the Fury Usyk rematch, which makes sense because he's Tyson Fury's best mate and he's fought on Tyson Fury undercards before, I think a couple of times. Don't know who that's going to be against yet. They haven't announced anyone. It's possible it'll just be a rematch against Zheli Zhang, but hopefully not, because that was probably not really a fight anyone needs to see twice. And ultimately, that's going to be a Saudi Arabia bout. So whatever gets decided is whatever the Sheikh decides. Whoever the fellas who pay for it are going to decide what they want to see from those fights. So Parker will get something, and we'll find out. But that's too short of a turnaround to get Dubois or Joshua in a hurry. Although this does put him in a better situation to be able to fight Anthony Joshua at some point again and avenge his previous defeat, which is always what Parker says he wants to do. Is he wants to avenge his defeats against Dillian Whyte, against Anthony Joshua. He might not get the chance because Joshua looked like a guy who doesn't necessarily want to box much anymore the way he fought in that one. And Dillian Whyte recently failed a drugs test, so he don't know what he's up to either. So we'll see what Parker ends up with. But he's hanging around. Like he's still becoming the ocean in his own way at the top of the heavyweight division. He's not going anywhere. He's part of the scenery there, and I'm sure he'll get to fight someone decent, some kind of decent name on that December card underneath the Fury Usyk rematch. I mentioned Whainga, aka Django Apello, who Parker had beaten a couple years ago. He also fought Hemi Ahio like a year or so ago and beat Hemi Ahio. But then those two had a rematch recently, a couple of weeks ago in Auckland on the undercard of Devon Nyika's latest fight. And it was I think this one was the one where it was a weird judge's decision where it was like a split decision victory for Ahio, but like two of the judges had it really quite like significantly in his favor on the cards, and then the other one just went randomly in a completely different direction, which you do get that sometimes with these combat sports judges. But Hemi Ahio did get the victory there, so he avenges his previous defeat, and he's back on track with his heavyweight career. And David Nyika had just a comprehensive victory against a dude who sort of looked like a guy who had fought is an American fellow Tommy Carpensi, who had fought for titles like multiple times in the cruiserweight division in the past, but had only fought once in like the last 3 years or something like that, and came into the bout looking pretty classy. Once he started getting hit in the rib cage a few times, pretty quickly seemed like he didn't want to be there anymore. And so that bout quickly descended into a comfortable Devon Conway knockout victory. And he himself is working his way towards what is a pretty open cruiserweight division at the moment, at this, as you know, as far as the top of the division goes, largely because Alexander Usyk just cleaned everything out and then moved up to heavyweight. And most of the best cruiserweights do try to aim for that heavyweight where you get much bigger paychecks for those fights, for those but much more publicized fights, which leaves a little bit of chaos in their wake, but that's chaos that David Nyika can use to his advantage to move pretty quickly up the division. So he's still yet to have a pretty serious fight against someone competitive and challenging, but he's getting towards that point as well. So there's a couple nice storylines there in the Kiwi boxing stuff as well as some good yarns going on there.
And of course, Lani Daniels retained her IBF heavyweight belt. Must have been on that same card as Hemi Ahio, was it?
I think it was a couple weeks earlier, but yeah, around about similar times.
So she won on September 7th. So Lani Daniels has 7 wins in a row. We've also got Mia Motu, who fought back in April. She is undefeated. So she's pretty good. And I think I figured out that Joseph Parker, since he lost to Dillian White, he is 11-1. So he's got 5 wins in a row. He had the loss to Joe Joyce, but prior to the loss against Joe Joyce, he had 6 wins in a row. So he's 11-1 in his last 12 fights. And we've also got David Nyika on the rise, Hemi Ahio doing good things as well. As I mentioned earlier, the Breakers offered a bit of sunshine for us. So shout out to the Breakers. We aren't that high on the Breakers, and we did chat about their bad vibes in the preseason, and then they came out and they had a big win over the Brisbane Bullets to start the NBL campaign. That is balanced by just their desperation to be American, because that's been updated with they're going back to face they're going to do something with the Philadelphia 76ers in the NBA, and it's like, yo, NBL, Australian NBL, just chill out. You can be Australian, it's all good. And I would suggest the joy of the Australian NBL is that it's a very good Australian basketball league. You don't need to be as desperate and as thirsty as you are for the Americanness. Like, just chill out a wee bit.
Do you know how many Aussie NBL teams are doing what the Breakers are doing and interrupting their season to go play NBA preseason games like this year? Do you know how many others are doing it?
I want to say all of them, and I want to say none of them at the same time.
Well, one of those questions, or one of those answers is correct, because apparently I didn't double check this, but I did see it written in like officially sourced sources. None. Apparently it's only the Breakers are bothering to do this year. And that's, yeah, the thing is the NBL is very thirsty for that American attention. You see that so much with how they brand their Next Star stuff. But even the rest of the NBL isn't as thirsty as the Breakers are at the moment. So it's add that to the bad vibes thing. But they did have a good win. They had a really good win against, well, they had 3/4 of a really good win against the Brisbane Bullets, but they got the dub on the board, which is what matters.
Just from the announcement that the Breakers were extending whatever their trip to America, old Matt Walsh, GM guru, he said,
Oy.
As a team, we're always pushing to compete on the bigger stages, and there's no bigger basketball stage than the NBA. But you're not in the NBA, bro.
Brackets preseason. We're going to be playing as uncontracted players.
You're just an NBL team who's kind of an all right NBL team. Like, you're not an NBA team, so just chill out. Like, just know your role. That's the biggest note I can give to the Breakers. Just know your role. Try win a game. You did that. now try and win another game. And this win over the Brisbane Bullets did feature a little twist for the Breakers. Because as you might be able to tell, not a huge fan of the way the Breakers are operating right now. But if they do win, we will enjoy their winning ways. They had a couple of Kiwis in the team. Old Sam Mennenga, who is, it's different spelling to Mennenga, but I did have a little thought in my head, like, because I imagine Sam Mennenga, that might be Finland or something like that, Iceland. I don't think he's from Vanuatu, which I believe is where the Mennenga comes from, but I think Sam Mennenga is ENGA and Mennenga is INGA, but that's just a little twist in my mind. The Breakers did have a big performance from Sam Mennenga, and also Max Darling got a bit of game time. I believe he was in the starting lineup as well, so a couple of Kiwis. So we not only had a Breakers win, but we had a couple of Kiwis playing some... Well, one Kiwi played a prominent role, the other Kiwi played basketball. So it was just a great start for the Breakers, aside from their desperation to be accepted by America.
Yeah, that game was good fun because Brisbane also had two Kiwis in the starting lineup because you knew Tyrell Harrison was going to be there because he was MVP of the NBL Blitz in preseason, and everyone's just talking now about how what a huge season's coming up for him. He's getting good reporting. He's getting sort of like the coverage from within the league. I've seen a few of those, like I think ESPN did like one of those, again, trying to copy NBA stuff, but one of those like unnamed survey type things, get a bunch of players off the record, but voting for a bunch of ideas leading to the season. And he was one of the most underrated players according to like his peers in the league, and players saying he is potentially the best player on that Brisbane Bullets team, and just huge buzz about Tyrell Harrison coming into the season. But also Toy Smith-Milner got the start in this game too, and I think scored 10 points, had a couple 3-pointers, just did sort of the stuff that he does. So yeah, there was like I think Max Darling was there to play small forward, whereas Toy Smith-Milner was there to play power forward. But you had a forward on each team, so they're not directly up against each other. But you also had starting centers up against each other with Harrison and Mennenga. So that was awesome. And despite the buzz on, although I will say there has been good buzz on Sam Mennenga as well, and how he performed through preseason, and the fact that he was starting is likely because Freddie Gillespie was out suspended for this game. But you might have to consider whether maybe Mennenga should continue to start, because they looked great with him there. And he had a 3-pointer basically straight away. And that battle between Harrison and Mennenga went completely towards Mennenga. And it was because he was able to show some shooting range. The Breakers themselves hit 7 of 9 3-pointers to start this game. So obviously that was unsustainable. And I think they ended up shooting 9 of 21 overall. So that tells you that the threes dried up pretty quickly. They're not just the greatest 3-point shooting team ever. It's actually just they had a hot streak to start. But part of that was because they were able to stretch out the Bullets and get open shots, and they just worked harder off the ball and looked really good. So that's also credit to rookie head coach Petteri Koponen, who deserves a lot of credit for that, for how he used Sam Mennenga, for how he set up his team, for the enthusiasm they played with, and for the risky move of chucking Max Darling into the starting lineup as well, who didn't have a shot, didn't score a point, didn't get a rebound. He did get 1 assist and a couple personal fouls, but he played 16 minutes for a winning team as the starter. So I don't think he can complain about that for the dude who was very clearly going to be like the he played 1 minute last season. He played 16 minutes in the first game of the new season. So fantastic there. Regardless of what he did, he was part of a victory. And yeah, Sam Mennenga won the duel between him and Harrison. Mennenga scored a equal career high 22 points. He was excellent. So very good win from the Breakers, even though they did do the Breakers thing that we did see from them in a couple, because they got thrashed in the first couple preseason games against Sydney. Then they were more competitive in the Blitz, but they had this tendency to throw away games in the fourth quarter. They were up 26 points at one point in the third quarter against Brisbane. They only won by 4 points in the end. So that game had gone another 60 seconds, they'd probably have lost. They were barely hanging on at the end, but they did hang on and they did win.
There were wins for Illawarra, Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, and the Breakers. Which Kiwi stood out to you from the 4 other winning teams? Or maybe there was a Kiwi who played really well in a losing effort, aside from Harrison.
Um, yeah, well, didn't get as much of Hiram Harris and Ty Webster influence as I might have liked for Perth because they just had Pinder and Cotton, as they often do, just scored 25 plus each and as part of their win. So it wasn't a lot there. You did get some Tommy Vodanovic minutes for Southeast Melbourne. That was cool. Ruben Tarangi started for Tasmania, but didn't do a whole lot. I would say you probably got to look towards your Melbourne United trio there, where Flynn Cameron had an all right little sort of 10-minute cameo off the bench, but Rob Lowe in the starting lineup and Shea in the starting lineup. Of course, Shea was really good for Melbourne as they won in the opening game of the season. I won't say avenging their grand final defeat to Tasmania last year, but they did beat the team that beat them in the grand final, so that's worth something. And they were excellent. And you got a more of a balance between Lowe and Marcus Lee, their import center, than I thought. I thought maybe Lowe would get like 25% of those minutes. They were nearly split evenly, and Rob Lowe played really well. And will play better as he gets a little bit more accustomed to the team again. Shea awesome as always. So that's where you want to look, I think, moving forwards for the Kiwi NBL basketball scene.
I did enjoy your use of the word munted earlier on because I haven't heard munted in a long time, but I like the word
It needs
munted.
to come back. I think you're right. It's faded a bit, eh?
Yeah, like I've definitely when you're around the lads, you definitely hear someone call someone a munter. Like that's pretty common, but I haven't heard they were munted or I got munted. Like, it's just a good word, munted. So shout out um, to the munters and shout out to those who are munted or have been munted or about to get munted. The
To those who munt and to those who get munted.
the Blackcaps. I don't think this qualifies as a munting. I don't think they got
Nah.
munted, but they did lose to Sri Lanka, and I suspect we'll get into some real nitty gritty in the subscriber podcast because we'll also be previewing the second test that is at Gore. So we're back at Gore
Huh.
for the second test, which is a bit strange, but hey, anyone who watched the first test between Sri Lanka and the Black Caps at Gore wouldn't mind another test at Gore. It's just a beautiful venue, and that is the beauty of beauty. That's a lot of beauty. Beautiful, beautiful. That is the joy of test cricket around the world, is just spending a couple of days in a beautiful part of the world. And Saturday, I did catch a episode of Anthony Bourdain, No Reservations, on the Living Channel. Shout out. Guess where Anthony Bourdain was traveling? He was in Sri Lanka. And this was a while ago because it was 4 years after the Boxing Day tsunami. Big ups to everyone affected by the Boxing Day tsunami. Horrible event here in the Southern Oceans. Plural, because I'm not sure exactly what oceans they are. But he was in Sri Lanka, and it was just after, not just after, it was a couple of years after the Boxing Day tsunami, and there was he was there while there's a lot of political upheaval. But I was thinking that that's a sign that this is just a fantastic moment for a Black Caps victory. Obviously, the food in Sri Lanka is off the chisane, so if might need to hit that up with a little trip to Gaul, because Gaul is beautiful, Sri Lanka is beautiful, the food is amazing. Anthony Bourdain had a good time. I had a good time from my couch in Auckland, Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, watching a bit of cricket, bit of test cricket. So it was a good time. Love a bit of Gaul, love a bit of Sri Lanka, and I don't love how soft this Black Caps batting unit is. I do not love the fact that the Black Caps have lost 3 tests in a row, stretching back to back-to-back losses against Australia, abandoned test against Afghanistan, lose the first test against Sri Lanka. I do not enjoy the dip in standards of the Black Caps. Like, it's just, they're not the same. They're not the same in the sense that the fielding's a bit sloppy. There's no gritty, rugged batting. It's just kind of, battle for a bit, get out, hit out, just do something dumb, not really focused in. Like if Glenn Phillips is batting, you got to be ready for a single. Daryl Mitchell wasn't ready for the single. He's run out after he's on like 70 runs or whatever. So there's that element of the Blackcaps. Like, I like what the Blackcaps are doing. I like who they are. I think they can be far more Kiwi in their identity. But overall, I like what the Blackcaps are doing. However, their batting is soft. And that's just straight up and down, full steak and cheese pie. They are soft. At the same time, we've got Rachin Ravindra, we got Glenn Phillips, and we got Big Will O'Rourke, the War, from Smashing Hands fame. And it's kind of complicated, I think, in absorbing this test specifically, because there are foundation elements that make this Blackcaps team really fun, really exciting, and I think we should all be hopeful about the future of Blackcaps cricket and Kiwi cricket in general, because I think there's a lot of great women's players on the rise as well. Like, Rachin Ravindra's awesome. He was the best batter at the ODI World Cup, and he's continuing that in Test cricket because he's got the highest average of Blackcaps batters in the World Test Championship right now. He's averaging 57.7. Kane Williamson's averaging 54.1. Now, who's the dude with the best bowling average? It's the Big War. He's averaging 15.5. Matt Henry is averaging 16.9. So the dude with the highest batting average for the Blackcaps in the World Test Championship and the dude with the best bowling average are the newest players to the Test team, or the newest players to consistent Test roles, because Ravindra did have a stint with the Test team a couple of years ago, but now he's in at number 4, and he's got the highest batting average of the Blackcaps in the World Test Championship. Now we've got Will O'Rourke steaming in, bowling 140 Ks, nipping the ball all over the show in Sri Lanka, swinging the ball when no one else is swinging the ball, and he's got the lowest bowling average for the Blackcaps in the World Test Championship. So there's these, like, the result stinks, to be honest, because they collapsed in the second innings. The game's on the line. You got a reachable target of 275 runs, which is on show because you're all out for 211. Like, you're not that far off. There was hope for the last day, and you just give it up. Like, it's just soft. But at the same time, there's some freaky youngsters in this team. Rachin Ravindra and Will O'Rourke are doing amazing stuff with bat and ball. And then you've got someone like Glenn Phillips doing everything. Fielding, bowling, batting. He is the most exciting cricketer in the world. He's the most exciting cricketer in the team. Of course, you got Kane Williamson. You got Ajaz Patel doing great stuff as well. But it's like, I just don't think the Blackcaps are that good right now. Because also with the ball, there's a lot of bad balls. Like Will O'Rourke, the way I was thinking about it, he's not necessarily a bowler right now who's bowling 5 good balls and 1 bad ball. Ideally, you bowl 2 overs worth of good balls. Like, that's legendary stuff. Will O'Rourke is like, he's going to bowl 2 good balls at you, and some of the Sri Lankan batters couldn't survive those 2 good balls in an over. But he's also going to bowl a couple of bad balls, and that's all right. You take that. But there's other bowlers in the lineup who are bowling 2 or 3 bad balls in the over as well, and there's batters who aren't scoring runs. And there's 2 batters. We've got Tom Blundell, who's averaging 12.7 in the World Test Championship, and we got Devon Conway averaging 11.5. Now, this is a bit weird because Matt Henry and Timothy Southey have more runs in the World Test Championship than Devon Conway. And Matt Henry's just having a whack. Matt Henry's just coming out and having a whack. He's got a strike rate of 110 in the World Test Championship. Tim Southey He's got a strike rate of 74. So he's kind of having a whack, kind of not having a whack. He's not scoring many runs anyway. But he's scoring more runs than Devon Conway, who's got a strike rate of 35. So Devon Conway's literally not scoring many runs and not scoring them very quickly, which is the epitome of out of form. There's a whole lot of kind of jumping off points here, diving boards into the Blackcaps pool after this first test. Let's start with Devon Conway. How are you feeling about Devon Conway? Because I want to add, he's got this casual contract with New Zealand cricket. New Zealand cricket were pretty damn generous to Devon Conway because the only other bloke with a casual contract is the legend of Kane Williamson. That's how New Zealand cricket views Devon Conway. And the root of that casual contract is the SA20, South Africa's T20 tournament. I want to put this out there because I was thinking about this with the Breakers. Like, there's a chance that the Breakers are going on their big American trip and they're at the bottom of the ladder. They won the first game, but it's possible that they're going to America as the worst team in the NBL. It might be unlikely, but it's possible, which is just a very weird situation. It is unlikely, but possible that Devon Conway, by the time he goes to the SA20, he's not a first 11 player in any format for the Blackcaps. He might be out of the test team, and he's not going to be playing those ODIs and T20s over the summer, so someone else might take their opportunity. Thinking back to the Ford Trophy stuff, Tim Robinson might be someone who benefits from Ford Trophy starting the summer when he can come out and bang boundaries and put himself in that Blackcaps mix. Because Tim Robinson's a good batter, but he's not necessarily a Plunkett Shield dynamo. The shorter the format, the better his batting, so maybe Ford Trophy is a good place for him to start. Those are the type of dudes who are going to get those opportunities this summer. And to be honest, Kiwis don't care about T20 cricket around the world. Like, Kiwis don't judge New Zealand cricketers on what they do in random T20 tournaments. They judge Kiwi cricketers on what they're doing for New Zealand. And right now, Devon Conway isn't doing anything for New Zealand. He was kind of mediocre at the T20 World Cup. His form slump stretches into T20 international cricket. So I can see a situation where he falls out of the first 11 for the test team at some point over the next 3 months. And because he's not playing ODIs and T20 cricket, he's just overtaken by other dudes who are desperate for that opportunity to represent New Zealand. And if all of that happens, we may leave this summer, otherwise known as autumn. We may enter autumn and Devon Conway's just no longer a Blackcap. That is the cold, hard reality of what we're dealing with right now. All of which can change if Devon Conway scores some runs, but he's averaging 11 in the World Test Championship. He's not averaging 26 like Tom Latham in the World Test Championship. He's not averaging 32.4 like Daryl Mitchell in the World Test Championship. He's not averaging 27 like Will Young in the World Test Championship. He's not averaging 20 like Kyle Jamieson. He's not averaging 23 like Matt Henry. He's not averaging 11.54 like Tim Southey. He's averaging 11.50. And that is really low. Like, that's White Ferns low. And it's a very precarious position for Devon Conway.
That's White Ferns ODI T20 low. So Blackcaps test low is like that. Those things shouldn't, they should not be crossing over those paths.
So Devon Conway in the World Test Championship, average of 11.5, strike rate of 35. Those are White Ferns T20 numbers.
Yeah. 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 Well, I don't know. I don't know where we're at with that because he's so clearly out of form, and I kind of struggle to see them dropping him, even though like Will Young is right there. You get a left and right hand combination. He's opened the batting with Tom Latham before. It wouldn't be a fresh thing. It's not the ideal spot for Will Young, but he would probably be the next candidate. Because I don't think you really want to mess with Rachin Ravindra batting it as well as he has done at 4. I think he gets priority there because he's got runs on the board, so fair enough. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I thought this performance wasn't as soft as you seem to think it was. Like I certainly wasn't a hardened Blackcaps performance, and it's clear that they just have never been able to replace the not so much the ability, but I'll say the profile of someone like BJ Watling just at the bottom of the middle order who is your insurance against a batting collapse. But I don't know that I don't know if I would call their 4th innings a collapse, because I think they put some partnerships together. It's just you need a big partnership in there. You need 100+ partnership if you're going to chase that total in those conditions away from home against on a spinning deck, which is not our strength anyway. And we didn't get that. Sri Lanka did. Sri Lanka in their 3rd innings, I think it was Chandamal and Karunaratne, I think, put on a big partnership, and the Blackcaps did quite well to come back and break that partnership and cleaned up Sri Lanka's lower order in both innings really nicely. I think there was twice where they began the in first sessions they did that twice. They came back, started the new day with Sri Lanka midway through an innings and cleaned up a bunch of wickets, and that was good.
And
there was stuff like that's the kind of thing we haven't always seen from them. Yeah, go.
And I think it must have been the subscriber pod, the bonus pod on Thursday. I did say I was curious to see if that was going to be the case, because that's another indicator of the Blackcaps' kind of culture and tactics and planning and preparation. Like the fielding standards have dropped. I think the wicket keeping quality has dropped. And there's a few other similar observations, but I always felt confident that the Blackcaps could start a new day, start a new session, and take wickets. So that is a very good sign.
It's a good sign. However, at the same time, in that batting session, you also saw Devon Conway get out just before the end of a session, and you saw Mitch Santner get out just before the end of a session. So there were also flip sides to that where you didn't get it, and probably not a coincidence that it was those two as well, because I thought there was I say that I thought the overall performance wasn't. It was soft in places. It certainly wasn't a hardened performance. It was soft in places. Those places were players like Devon Conway and Mitchell Santner with the bat, who Santner just looked like he was drowning out there, and then eventually chipped a ball straight to cover with one of the rare hittable ones he got, which was just a struggle. But then at the same time, you got Ajaz Patel came in and batted nicely and saw them through to the end of the day. Rachin Ravindra, fantastic in that innings. He was unlucky to get out the way he did early the next day because, I don't know, I thought that pitched outside leg stump. Obviously, the technology proved me wrong. It was close enough. It was on that borderline. And you had instances throughout that test. I thought Kane Williamson was extremely unlucky in the 2nd innings, and we know how influential he is in 4th innings chases. When the Blackcaps win 4th innings chases, I think he averages 110 or something. And when they lose, he averages less than 30. And he got out for about 30 here. So that was pretty much at that point, I'm like, okay, most likely we're going to lose this. But he came down the wicket and got a ball that turned sideways and stumped him. That's not a normal delivery to have to face. It was just a bit of a freak instance. But I thought in the first innings where he scored 50 as well, and I think this probably happened to Daryl Mitchell a little bit leading up to his run out as well. It was the runs had been flowing, but then the runs dried up. And there was a stage where Williamson was scoring quite nicely at around 70, 80 strike rate for a lot of that innings. In both innings actually, but in the first one he got to the point where suddenly he'd scored 2 runs of 20 balls or something like that, or just the outlets disappeared and there weren't so many easy singles, and then he gets out within that sort of stretch, and that's probably a credit to Sri Lanka's bowling and captaincy as much as anything, because I don't know that we quite did that. I think the Blackcaps were good at fighting through and getting wickets, but they weren't necessarily able to tie maiden overs together and release the pressure. When Sri Lanka were getting into their big partnerships, the runs just seemed to flow at that stage. They're very good at getting out new batters, but it needed a bit more than that. And I also thought, like, if you pressed me for the big difference in why they didn't win this, I wouldn't put it down on the fourth innings. I would say it was if anything, it was the second innings where they just in the past you sort of another thing about the Black Caps at their peak is that you just trust that they'll get 50 runs from their last four batters. It's like the tail order will give them something like that. One of them is going to hit a couple of sixes and get through or whatever. Glenn Phillips did some of that. He's not a tail order batter though. He was batting with the tail and got them some runs near the end to at least get them into a lead. But I don't know. I just felt like the Black Caps of old wouldn't have been 30 runs ahead. They'd have been 70 or 80 runs ahead. And if that was the case, that chase at the end is 210, 220, which I think is a gettable chase. 275 was maybe just a little beyond them in those conditions. But one of the reasons it was beyond them is because there's like Devon Conway just gives you no confidence at the top of the order at the moment. And there's a couple of guys in that team. I thought Tom Blundell batted all right. Like I thought he battled through. He wasn't fluent, but I thought he at least stuck around and tried to put some runs on the board. Didn't get that from Santner with the bat. Didn't get that from Southey with the bat. Did get a little bit from Ajaz and even a little bit from O'Rourke in the first innings, batting with Phillips. But just a couple too many soft spots in that lineup, and it starts at the top because they're losing a wicket very early on most occasions because Devon Conway, and it's not just that he's getting out. Like you can get good deliveries and you're dismissed, so it goes. You can have bad runs of form and not be that much of a thing because you trust that. Well, like if Kane Williamson had a little streak where he doesn't score he has a couple series where he doesn't score 100, you kind of feel like, well, he's probably just going to score a double ton next time. That's going to come around because he's still. Sometimes you just get good deliveries. Sometimes you get a lot of good deliveries in a row, but that luck balances out over time. With Devon Conway, it doesn't feel like bad luck. And you highlighted in the newsletter how like his head position for the two dismissals, how his head is over, like past the ball in one dismissal and inside the line of the ball for the other dismissal. The second one was the one that bummed me out the most because it's just another inside edge bat flailing way away from his pad. And just how many times have you seen him get up that way? You can't keep doing the same. Like he's not fixing this issue that is very clearly what other teams are now targeting him with. And I don't know how long you can keep going like that. Like it's not very fair to Devon Conway either. It's at some point he needs to like step away and figure out how he's going to like bounce back and at the international level. Maybe it means, as you highlighted before, maybe he doesn't. Maybe it means he settles into a nice lucrative T20 career there. But you just can't have a test match opener who's getting out in the same soft way as often as Conway seems to be. Like something's got to change there.
Like literally dangling your bat.
Yeah.
Past your head, past the stumps, past your foot. That is officially now known as the Conway. I'm just doing the Conway. I'm just putting my bat out there. So we're coming up on summer. So any club cricketers out there, if your old mate's just dangling the bat outside off stump, he's just doing the Conway. And I don't know like what it means technically. Like we just watch a lot of sport. We'd like to think we're pretty switched on about the sports we talked about, but we're not experts. Like I'm not a technical expert. But the idea of Devon Conway being LBW when his head, so he's a left-hander and his head is outside the line of the ball and he's LBW, and then he's going through the gate, which is behind me, the dismissal we're talking about where he's doing the Conway, his head is inside the line of his bat. So the first dismissal, his head is outside the line of the ball. Second dismissal, his head is inside the line of the ball. In neither dismissal, his head is in line with the ball. And of course, the ball's moving, the ball's spinning, the ball's seaming around, but it just doesn't look good. Like it doesn't help you hit the ball. Hence, he missed the ball, then he edged one onto his stumps. The bit of Santner there. I think we're seeing the myth of Mitchell Santner, the Mitchy myth.
I
myth
agree.
of Mitch, because
I thought about that in very similar terms.
Like, he's a good batter. He's a good bowler. He's a good fielder. We've just never seen it in Test cricket. So it's
Well,
just
it's
a
like he looks good at all of these things. He looks good, and then he doesn't score runs and he doesn't take wickets. I won't
that,
criticize the fielding. The fielding's always pretty good, but he took one wicket in this Test match, and it was the 20th out of 20 wickets that they got. There was a time when they were pressing to bowl Sri Lanka out, and he just wasn't a factor. Meanwhile, Ajaz Patel was just ripping through them. He was bowling brilliantly in that second innings, and Will O'Rourke in both innings was fantastic. Maybe there's a little bit of Tim Southee maybe ought to be in the same bag as Santner on this, but I felt like he did more of a job of tying up an end and leading to pressure at the other end. Santner did a bit of that too, but it's just like you don't. I mean, he just doesn't create chances, Like, you don't feel like he's going to get a wicket even when he's bowling well. It's that idea again. Like, it all looks good, but there's not really any end product to it. He's like the dude in a football team who throws in every step over and then gets like no goals, no assists.
or the Warriors attacking shape, where they do all this shape, they do all these decoy runs, and they're just one on one with the winger out by the sideline. Like, it looks good, but it's not very effective. Thing about Santner, he's an all rounder. Like, I think he's in the team because he bats, he bowls, he fields. He doesn't do any of those as good as Glenn Phillips, so that's a little bit of an issue. But also,
or Michael Bracewell.
what? I don't know. I don't know about Bracewell, but Mitchell Santner's averaging 10 in the World Test Championship with the bat. 42 runs in 5 innings. Like, he looks good with the bat, doesn't score many runs. He looks good with the ball, doesn't take many wickets. Like, I'm not convinced that Michael Bracewell is a better option in that position, but that gets into the makeup of your bowling attack because at some point Will O'Rourke will need a rest because he's steaming in Sri Lanka. He's going to steam in India. Like, he can't play all 5 tests. Tim Southee can't play all 5 tests. Matt Henry won't play all 5 tests because he missed this one. And Ben Sears won't play all 5 tests. So they need to manage the workloads of those seam bowlers. So maybe a seamer comes in for Michael Bracewell because the ball's nipping around in Sri Lanka. Like, Matt Henry can be effective in Sri Lanka. Ben Sears is hostile, so he can be effective in Sri Lanka. There's options available. Or you just select another batter. Like, I don't know. But Mitchell Santner, regardless of the makeup of the team, the thing here with Mitchell Santner is he is doing Mitchell Santner, where it looks good, but it's just not that effective. We have to wait and see what that means for the team. With regards to the batting, like, it's not quite as soft as I make it seem, but at no stage am I confident. So in the first innings, everyone down to Phillips faces at least 40 deliveries. Conway, 17 runs off 59 deliveries, strike rate of 28.8. He faced 59 deliveries. I never felt like he was back in form. Like, Daryl Mitchell's coming out and he's reverse sweeping everything. He's hoiking everything this way and that way. Scores runs, but I'm not filled with confidence that Daryl Mitchell is an absolute monster. Tom Blundell, the only bloke who looks less confident than Tom Blundell is Devon Conway. So it's like, go down to the second innings, there's a few decent performances. Like, even Tom Latham, like, he's grinding it out, but I don't think this is like vintage Tommy Latham. Kane Williamson looks good, but as you said, like, whether it's Kane Williamson, Daryl Mitchell, Tom Blundell, they can't like ride the wave of an innings. Like, we're just going to get through this tough patch, absorb it, be gritty, and then score our runs. They aren't willing to grind down the opposition, essentially. That's soft.
Didn't become the ocean.
They don't become the ocean. And that's where the softness comes in. But it's like, I feel this is how I'd like to portray it. I feel good about Rachin Ravindra and Kane Williamson and Glenn Phillips. The rest I just don't feel strong about. Blundell and Conway are out of form, that's clear. Tom Latham and Daryl Mitchell are not in the same category as Devon Conway or Tom Blundell. However, they have dropped down in their performances. This is the first back-to-back year, this is the first time in Tom Latham's career where he's averaging below 35 in back-to-back years of test batting. Daryl Mitchell has a test average of 49, which is down because he's not scoring as many runs now, and his World Test Championship average over 6 tests is 34.5. Mitchell's averaging 32.4, Latham's averaging 26.1 in the World Test Championship. Both of those are down on what they usually do or what they had done previously. And when you they both scored 50s in the game, but I don't feel as confident about them as I do Ravindra and Williamson. But also, their production has gone down over the last 12 months. Meanwhile, you've got Conway and Blundell averaging below 12. That is the combination that I feel is soft. But
yeah, that's it. Because if you have those guys, because the Mitchell and Latham kind of slumps are slumps that come they're natural slumps within a career. You have these ups and downs.
Well, let's call them dips in form dips.
Yeah, dips. Yeah, they're dips. They're not quite slumps. They're just dips. They're you get these little peaks and valleys, but these aren't either of those. These are just like a hillside, a little dip in the paddock there, but. The team can handle those because you're always going to have a couple guys who are in that who are just still awaiting their next big score, because that's all it takes to turn an average of 30 to 35 over a year into an average of 45 plus is you get an unbeaten century or something like that. Those guys are awaiting their next scores like that. An unbeaten century isn't going to fix Devon Conway's recent average. He needs a couple of those. He needs to do a lot because he's done more. And the team, because when you've got guys like that, the team suddenly can't withstand the dips as well as they should ordinarily have been able. The dips become a problem because the slumps are dragging them down. You just got fewer guys you can rely upon to score runs. And they weren't that far away from winning this test match. Just a few things, if they got a little bit more, a few more of those tail ender runs, if they just got a bigger partnership in either innings, because really you don't want to leave it to the fourth innings. You want to get that done in the second innings, build a bigger lead. It's there to be done, but didn't quite do it.
They did fill us with a bit of hope throughout the test because apparently the Blackcaps 9 to 11 batters are really good. They showed a few times the stats where the average for the Blackcaps tail enders was second highest to Australia or something in that period. However,
and I wonder how many of those runs were scored by Trent Bolt, Neil Wagner, Matt Henry, who wasn't playing this test.
It's more recently, if you just hold your horses. So Matt Henry, he wasn't playing in the test. He scored a lot of runs. Kyle Jamieson, he averages 20 with the bat. Wasn't playing this test. So, those stats, they kind of filled me with hope right then. And even Neil Wagner, his last test innings was 33 runs at a strike rate of 122. None of that was actually in the team.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was a bit weird. Another sign that things are a bit soft with the Blackcaps. Now again, Latham and Mitchell, they scored 50s. Blundell faced 43 deliveries and 65 deliveries. Kind of gritty, kind of solid. How many Blackcaps batters have centuries in the World Test Championship?
Assuming Williamson does, I know Ravindra does. No one got 100, I don't think, in Bangladesh. Oh, actually, Williamson, I think, got 100 and then didn't score a decent thing after that. So it might only be 2.
It's only 2.
Damn.
So there are only 2 Blackcaps batters in the World Test Championship who have scored a century. It's not a major issue, but it is a sign that there's just not enough hard work being done. They're not grinding out for long enough. They're not being switched on, focused for long enough. And by the time it gets to Glenn Phillips, like, I'd like to see Glenn Phillips batting with Devon Conway. I'd like to see Glenn Phillips batting with Tom Latham, with Kane Williamson, because that would be pretty funky, because at the moment Glenn Phillips is batting with the tail and he just smashes boundary, and that's pretty funky.
I'd like to see Glenn Phillips batting ahead of Tom Blundell, just quietly as well. Cheeky swap in the order.
I don't, like, at the moment, Blundell, he's battling. I don't mind, because I think Phillips is better with the tail. He's just going to smash it, so that's all good. We do have a lot of positivity here, though. Like, Ravindra's awesome, Will O'Rourke's awesome, Phillips scored runs, took wickets again. So what do you think about Will O'Rourke? What do you think about Ravindra and Glenn Phillips? Shout out to AJ Patel, because he was fantastic as usual outside of Aotearoa.
Well, I wasn't expecting O'Rourke to be as good as he was in that test match, just because it's like, so it's not just that he's young in his test career, it's also that he's young in his cricket career. Like, most Blackcaps his age are still establishing themselves, like most future Blackcaps his age are still establishing themselves domestically, and he's had a quick rise, but he's just like, yeah, man, like, he smashes hands, it's a skill that translates across continents, apparently. So yeah, he was excellent. And I think it must have been the Friday newsletter. I pointed out some of this stuff, and it's something that's interesting to track, because there's an obvious comparison between him and Kyle Jamieson, just because of their height, and also, I guess you could say, as Aucklanders who moved to Canterbury to get their starts domestically as well.
They also bowl big in-swingers to right-handers. Like, they literally do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just Will O'Rourke does it at 140 k's per hour. Kyle Jamieson does it more 134 to 135, and he's taller.
And Jamieson, probably because he's a little bit slower, does get a little bit more swing from those ones as well. You could argue a little bit more control as well, but O'Rourke makes up for that with a bit more bounce potentially. So, like, there's an obvious comparison between them in terms of their careers, in terms of their profiles. There's also a really quite funky comparison between their starts to Test cricket as well, because Jamieson came in and just took wickets copiously for the start of his career, and now Will O'Rourke is doing that. So it's O'Rourke's only played 3 Test matches, so it's too early to read into that necessarily, but there is a pattern emersion there where they're both just coming and been really excellent from day one in Test match cricket.
Well, there is a pattern, because in first class cricket, Will O'Rourke has 69 wickets and an average of 24.5, and Kyle Jamieson has 181 wickets and an average of 22.2. Jamieson's career average in Test bowling is 19.7, Will O'Rourke 15.5. So I think that is a window into the talent we have in New Zealand. But that talent just isn't quite leading to Test victories or comprehensive Test performances. However, as I think we talked about in the bonus pod last Thursday, the last 2 tours of Sri Lanka, the Blackcaps lost the first Test and won the second Test. Last time they were in Bangladesh.
Lost the first Test at Gaul both times as well.
Last time they were in Bangladesh, lost the first Test, won the second Test. Last time Bangladesh came to New Zealand, Bangladesh won the first Test. Blackcaps lost the first Test, won the second Test. So I think we should hope for a victory in the second Test. Not only because the Blackcaps need it, not only because the World Test Championship campaign needs it, but they've literally done this before. Like, they've lost the first Test by a pretty significant margin, whether it's in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, or elsewhere. Because I think there was one other example I wrote this morning in the deep dive. They England toured New
England.
Zealand.
Yeah.
They won the first test at Bay Oval, and then the Blackcaps won a epic at the Basin Reserve. So there's a pretty strong history of this Blackcaps group losing the first test by a significant margin and winning the second test. So that is what we can hang our hats on for the upcoming test, returning to Gaul on Thursday. The White Ferns are in line for a White Ferns series sweep. They've lost the first two games, and tonight the third T20 International against Australia will be played in Brisbane, not Mackay. First two games were up north in Mackay. Now they go down to Brisbane, where I suspect the White Ferns will win. Because that's what they usually do. Usually lose the first two games, win the last game when it doesn't matter. However, the White Ferns are in the midst of a 9-game T20 losing streak. And they are 2-13 in T20s. Wow. They are 2-13 in T20 since December 1st, 2023, which was just before the start of the summer. And of course, last summer started with a series defeat against Pakistan in New Zealand, which was a pretty alarming rock bottom. And since then, they've gone on to lose 9 consecutive T20 internationals. So shout out to Ben Sawyer, Scheming Sawyer. He's doing his thing. He's doing his thingy thing for the White Ferns. And they're just not really that good at cricket at the moment, you know? Like, especially T20 cricket. I think they're not very good at fielding. And they've got bad vibes. And they just do a lot of stuff that's a bit goofy, a bit weird. But T20 cricket, you want to have a whack. You want to play with a bit of vibrant energy. And especially Scheming Sawyer, he's a T20 guru around the world. Until you exposed them in one of our newsletters. But the White Ferns, like they can't score 150 runs. And that's a bit of an issue in T20 cricket. Because you're not going to score 150 runs every game, but you at least want the ability to score 150 runs. And that just kind of means that you're able to have a whack. The White Ferns, the first game, they were 143 for 7. And Australia reached the 145 for 5 in the 19th over. Then, and this is one of the typical White Ferns performances, where they play some good cricket. Amelia Kerr takes some wickets. They bowled out Australia for 142. That's awesome. And the White Ferns were trucking along pretty nicely. They had Susie Bates and Georgia Plymouth surviving until the end of the 7th over. They were 73 for 5. Well, let's go. They were 66 for 4, 73 for 5, and they reach 113 for 7. End of the game. So let me say that more concisely. They did well to bowl out Australia for 142, and then they just kind of meandered their way to 113 for 7. Like, they don't even have a whack. They don't even just come out and try to hit boundaries, and I don't think they can. And that's just where the White Ferns are at the moment. It's quite unfortunate, but it's something that we've been tracking for a long time. 2 games into the series, they have no batter with a strike rate over 115. They have hit 1-6. Shout out Maddie Green. She's hit a 6. They also, like, Amelia Kerr's been pretty good with the ball. Her wrong-in was fantastic in the second game. Leah Tahuhu and Molly Penfold, pretty good. Like, they're not too shabby. Jess Kerr just doesn't take wickets now. And in the Monday news that I documented how Jess Kerr's just consistently got worse under Ben Sawyer, so the Ben Sawyer effect isn't helping Jess Kerr. Fran Jonas is... I think she was the best White Ferns bowler since the start of December in T20s prior to the series. Now she's been overtaken by Amelia Kerr. So what has Fran Jonas done in the series against Australia? 1 wicket, an average of 44, RPO of 8.8. Sophie Devine's not bowling. Susie Bates isn't bowling, even though Susie Bates was fantastic with the ball in a small sample size last summer. Everyone talked up her ability to bowl spin. She just doesn't bowl anymore. Sophie Devine's just doing whatever she wants, so shout out to her, but I don't think it's necessarily contributing to wins. And, well, the White Ferns just kind of suck. Let's stretch this out to that bigger sample size going back to the start of December last summer. And there is still just Jess Kerr and Leah Tahuhu with batting strike rates over 115. So again, they don't have a whack. And Fran Jonas, 6.8 RPO, makes her the most economical bowler and the only bowler in the White Ferns who is going at lower than 7 RPO, aside from Susie Bates, who no longer bowls, even though she was pretty good bowling last summer. So they can't really have a whack, and they can't stop other teams having a whack. So I don't know how they're going to win T20 games, and they are preparing for a T20 World Cup. So they're preparing for a T20 World Cup with 9 consecutive losses, maybe a 10th, maybe not. But regardless of the team results, there is nothing in the individual statistics that suggests that the White Ferns are good at T20 cricket. Like efficiency, averages, there's just nothing. So I don't know how we can then expect the White Ferns to win T20 games. And this is, I don't know, every juncture of the White Ferns journey, it seems like they've hit a rock bottom. Like the ODI World Cup under Bob Carter, that was meant to be the rock bottom. And since then, things have just got a lot worse. So it's a very strange situation. And I don't want to talk about it anymore, but maybe you've got something to share.
Not a lot. I mean, they've had a tricky set of fixtures playing against England and Australia, like the 2 best teams in the world. So obviously they were going to lose more than they win there. But it does feel like, because even when you hear them talk, there's a lot of future building kind of chat and developmental kind of perspective, and something I've seen a lot through. In fact, I think I mentioned it on a couple podcasts ago about how all Whites and Football Ferns teams have been in similar situations where you get a little bit stuck focusing on the development aspect and forget that you're also supposed to be competitive now. Like you're supposed to be winning games now. You might be trying to get better in the future, but overshadowing results in order to just talk about experience and getting reps in for young players and things like this. They actually don't teach those young players how to win games. You're just teaching them how to lose. And that's kind of what the White Ferns do at the moment. Like there's a lot of young players in there, but maybe even not the right ones based on domestic form and whatever. But the bottom line is that they're trying to be a team that develops their talent on the international stage, and those players aren't getting better, and they're only learning how to lose games, and it's just the same cycle keeps getting repeated. But maybe this T20 World Cup will be the one that shakes things up. Who knows? But I suspect probably not.
And that is all even more insane considering there's a bunch of really solid cricketers who could help the team win right now, as those young players are developing in the natural development process, stomping ground of domestic cricket. But more to the point, the senior players aren't good enough. So if we look using this phase since the start of December. And as you said, they've been losing to England, they've been losing to Australia, but they also had a home series defeat to Pakistan, something that should never happen. And in this period, 15 games, Susie Bates has a strike rate of 109. Amelia Kerr's got an average of 20.7, strike rate of 110. Maddie Green's got an average of 18 with a strike rate of 95. Sophie Devine is averaging 20. She's got a strike rate of 112. Like, those are your best players who are the most experienced players, and they aren't doing the job. So how can you worry about the young players if the senior players aren't leading the way? And when you're talking about team, and you're talking about culture, and your senior players aren't doing the job, it's going to conjure up a funky smell. And by smell, and by funky, when I'm referring to smells, it's never a good thing. If you've got a funky swag, whew, that's pretty cool. But if you've got a funky smell, that's never a good thing. So shout out to the White Ferns. Hope you do well tonight. Hopefully you get that White Ferns sweep. Hopefully someone hits a 6. Hopefully someone concedes less than 7 runs and over. That's complicated. I kind of want the White Ferns to do the White Ferns sweep just because that's the most White Ferns thing to do. But I know what's going to happen. If they win this third T20 tonight, Tuesday night, everything's going to be honkadory. There's going to be positive yarns. We're building to the T20 World Cup. We went through the adversity. We got our win. We got the positive vibration everywhere. Everyone's rocking and rolling. Now we're preparing for the T20 World Cup. Then they'll suck at the T20 World Cup. So either way, that's how it's going to play out. A little bit of rugby league. I don't think we need to go too deep into rugby league, but we do have a couple of big ideas floating around. The first thing was the Warriors signing Sam Healey, who is a hooker from the Cronulla Sharks. And he seems to have been signed because I think he's got a bit more attacking juice around the ruck. He's a more creative hooker than Freddie Lussick, and even the youngsters, Makaya Tafua from Christchurch and Jacob Auloa from Auckland. I've got them as more crafty hookers who are really good defenders. Freddie Lussick is an awesome defender, but he doesn't have a burst of speed around the ruck, and I think the Warriors, as they have done with other positions, primarily the halves, they have identified a need and they have been able to go to Australia to recruit for that need. So they have identified the need for a bit more creativity, a bit more zip and pizzazz, panache around the ruck. And so they went and got Sam Healey, who seems to be a dynamic attacking hooker. So you got Wade Egan, who doesn't necessarily have a burst of speed, but he is a very good attacking threat around the ruck. And now you've brought in Sam Healey from the Sharks to do that job as well. And this hits into a couple of themes. I did do a deep dive on the website about Warriors recruitment and development. One of the themes that I've noticed is the growing recruitment from the South Island, and I have found it funny, like there was mass anxiety, mass fear about the Warriors, or about how the Bulldogs had a partnership or have a partnership with Canterbury Rugby League, and that is all true. That is all happening. There's youngsters from Canterbury, Christchurch going to the Bulldogs. There's coaches from Christchurch going to the Bulldogs. At the same time, the Warriors have a lot of players in back-to-back National Secondary Schools champion team St. Thomas of Canterbury, and the coach, probably one of the best rugby league minds in Christchurch, Andrew Almatangi, he's been linked with the Warriors since like 2017. So like everyone can chill out about the fear and anxiety. I think the Warriors are doing a great job in the South Island. But another key trend, a key theme there is the Warriors recruiting from Australia. And because I was thinking, like, they signed Sam Healey, but I really like Makai Tafua, who's from Christchurch, as I said, and I really like Jacob Auloa as well. But like, so there's someone like Lennox Tuiloma, who I talked about a few weeks ago. He's from Christchurch. He's played in back-to-back. He's played in the back-to-back finals for St. Thomas of Canterbury, and he was also starting lock for the Warriors under-17 team who won the Harold Matthews Cup. That is a pipeline that has just been established. So that's the first wave of New Zealand youngsters who can grow up in New Zealand, play Harold Matthews, play SG Ball, play Jersey Flegg, as well as playing all the New Zealand representative tournaments, South Island, Canterbury, all that stuff, against Auckland, against Counties Manukau, as well as the secondary schools tournament. So that's only going to strengthen the Junior Rugby League pathway in New Zealand. It already has. But there's still a bit of a gap. Where you look at someone like Sam Healey, he's played under 17s, he's played under 19s, he's played under 21s, he's played New South Wales Cup in Australia. And that's the same for Jet Cleary. That's the same for Luke Hansen, who's already with the Warriors. Like, they grew up and developed in that Australian pathway where you're playing the highest level of rugby league for your school, as well as the Harold Matthews, SG Ball, and Jersey Flegg stuff. And because I was like, they've signed Sam Healey, but I like Tafua, and I like Auloa. I even like Paul Roach. But the Warriors, I think they've identified that slow development process. And they're like Makai Tafua, Jacob Auloa. Jacob Auloa played SG Ball, and then he played a bit of New South Wales Cup, primarily played Jersey Flegg. Makai Tafua played a bit of Jersey Flegg, but he played a lot of New South Wales Cup. And when you look at guys like Ali Leotawa, Jacob Laban, Zion Maiu, Dimitri Sifakula, they've all kind of been slowed down at the New South Wales Cup level. And I think that's just because the Warriors are developing them properly so they don't flame out, but they don't have that background of playing Harold Matthews Cup and going through that system. It's a bit of a deep cut. Like, I'm kind of going too deep into the mangroves here, but there are now, like Lennox Tuiloma now, he started this year playing against the best under-17s in New South Wales. That's something that Ali Leotawa never got to do. So it's kind of like now you can develop in that way, whereas before you couldn't. And I think the Warriors have identified that, and they are slowing the development down. You've got to play a lot of New South Wales Cup. Like, you've got to play 30 games of New South Wales Cup. Tanistella Smith, he's 20 years old right now, and he's almost played 40 games in New South Wales Cup. So the Warriors are slow brewing the local talent, and then they're bringing in Australians. They have no issues recruiting from Australia. That's another interesting thing here. And Sam Healey, his father, Mitch Healey, played a lot of games for the Sharks. So you've got Jet Cleary, his dad is Ivan Cleary. And you've got Sam Healey, shout out to Mitch Healey. So you've got two former NRL players who are confident enough in the New Zealand Warriors system to send their sons. Obviously, Sam Healey can kind of think for himself. He's an adult, 21 years old. But those fathers, those NRL fathers, they are advising their son to go to the Warriors, especially Ivan Cleary and Jet Cleary. If you know nothing about the NRL and the Warriors, and you hear that, like, I don't know how you can be down on the Warriors system. Like, because what do the Storm do? They like sons of former NRL players. A lot of them go to the Storm. Remus Smith, Joe Chan, Jonah Pezzett, Tyron Wishart. They are all sons of NRL players, former NRL players. And if you know anything about rugby league, you're going to be like, the Storm want you, you're going to the Storm. because that's going to be the best place for your development. And the Warriors are not the Storm, but the Warriors are able to recruit from Australia. And in the case of Jet Cleary and Sam Healey, that move has been co-signed by fathers who know a lot about NRL systems. And I just find that interesting. But yeah, so the Warriors have signed a hooker. He's Australian. He's got that whole background in Australia. And it fits into some of these themes that I'm seeing with the Warriors, because they've identified the need for playmakers who have grown up in the Australian system, so they're a bit more advanced than the local lads. What does that look like? So it looks like Jet Cleary, Luke Hanson, Jesse Sorich, Talon Egan, and Jack Thompson, all moving from Australia to the Warriors. They've also identified the need for a bit more creativity and a bit more speed and flair around the ruck. So what do? Now, Aaron Clark is a Warriors player. I don't think he's going to play a lot of hooker, but he's fast for a middle forward, as we've talked about. What else do? They get a more attacking dummy half. Like, these are pretty obvious. Like, do you agree there? Like, the way I'm explaining it, these are pretty obvious holes that they have identified to fill.
Yeah, that seems to be the gauge from that picture there, is that like they have their systems in place, they're confident in those systems, they're not going to rush players through any quick. Like, there might be situations, I think we saw a few during the season just gone, where a player's called up from New South Wales Cup, or even, you know, just even players who haven't played that much New South Wales Cup. There's a couple of those dudes getting in there because the situation allowed, sort of conveniently, but they're not overly trying to rush those guys. They're not going to tell Leka Halasim or whoever that you're in every NRL squad because he did all right in the first couple. Like, he has his little stint when the window's open, then he goes back. But the recruitments from Australia in particular, because I guess you can say those are recruitments from outside their system, really. Like, there are other players that they'll sign from outside. There are Kiwi players they can sign from outside their system. But this, like, for the sake of what we're talking about here, it seems like those ones are all very much about how do we fill a need for not just for the NRL squad, but for the because you got to fill out each generation coming up so that you don't find yourself scrambling at the NRL level. You've got the next wave and the wave beyond that and the wave beyond that in your various age grades. So that's that's the impression I get, definitely, is that they're looking for very specific types of players that type of signing, that type of recruitment move is about trying to fill a gap in the squad one way or another, which just seems like an efficient way to go about things. Like, you've got, even just the fact that they can identify what those needs are tells you that they have everything else in order to be able to see that. Okay, well, we've got, there's a couple pieces of the jigsaw puzzle missing. Let's go out and find a blue bit of sky with a little cloud or whatever we need to put in this piece. But they're able to do that because things are just nicely set up until that point.
Yeah, I've got it. Like, I wrote this in the deep dive. Zion Mau's 21 years old and he's played 43 games in New South Wales Cup. Leka Halasim is 19 years old and he's played 30 games in New South Wales Cup. Laban is 22 years old and he's played 32 games in New South Wales Cup. So those dudes didn't play Harold Matthews. Some of them played SG Ball, but they are making up for that lack of kind of high quality Australian system by just grinding through week to week New South Wales Cup, because that's the most similar thing to the NRL. Like, you still need to travel to Australia for every second week. You still need to, diet, nutrition, recovery, mental fortitude, resilience, all that stuff needs to be evident in the week to week grind at New South Wales Cup. But those dudes,
senior footy.
It's senior footy against grown men. But those dudes didn't grow up playing against the best 17-year-olds in New South Wales, which is a big difference between the two pathways. But the key point is it's changing. Because someone like Lennox Tuiloma, he is now growing up as someone from Christchurch, he is growing up with the full pathway, which is very exciting. The best way I can portray the slow brew with the local juniors, though, is Tanner Stowers-Smith, another from Christchurch. He's 20 years old and he's played 36 games of New South Wales Cup. And if assuming he stays with the Warriors for next season, because this is the murkiest time of rugby league, and I'll get that in a jiffy. Assuming he stays with the Warriors, he could make his debut at 21 or 22 years old with over 40 games of New South Wales Cup experience alongside James Fisher-Harris. Like, that just seems like the best kind of situation for a young forward. Now, this is a very murky time of the rugby league calendar. We don't know which kind of reserve graders or juniors are moving, who's staying. So you need to keep that in mind as we speculate. Like, I could say, yeah, I really love Makai Tafua, and the Warriors are just slow brewing his development because they've signed Sam Healey from Australia. But in 3 months, Makai Tafua might pop up at an Australian club. So you got to kind of chill out with that. But also, because I do want to talk a lot about the Kiwis and the Kiwi Ferns, but I also just want to wait and see who's named in the squads. And this is the murky time because we're all kind of preparing for International Rugby League. And yet there's a new injury every week. There's a new unavailability every week, let alone the eligibility stuff. So I've kind of done my brainstorming with the Kiwis mixes and those things, which I don't think they touch on every available player. It's just kind of a guide to the main players who will be used. And I'm just waiting and seeing at the moment. And this is the thing, all season long, everyone throws out these kind of fantasy lineups, like Samoa are going to have all these players, the Kiwis are going to have all these players, Tonga's going to have all these players. But the international window at the moment is at the end of the NRL season. And this is a brutal sport where if you're playing a full NRL season, it's going to be pretty tough to back up for international footy. So the players who do play international footy, we need to put them on a pedestal because what they're doing is absolutely crazy. They're playing a full NRL season and then they're showing up weeks later, or in the case of the losers, they're showing up a month later to play international rugby league. But also we need to just chill out and wait and see because your fantasy lineups, your imagination going crazy about the combinations, like it just probably won't happen. And that's where I'm at with the Kiwis. Like I can say, oh, I'm really fascinated to see what the Jerome Hughes, Sean Johnson combo is going to be. Or, yeah, I'm fizzed up to see Jerome Hughes, Dylan Brown, or Jerome Hughes, Kieran Foran. Well, Foran's probably not going to play. Dylan Brown's out injured. And Sean Johnson, who knows what's going to happen there. Like, all that is wait and see. So the best thing for me to do with the Kiwis, my work is out there. So now it's just the wait and see moment. I will say the Kiwi Ferns, their half situation's a little bit different to the Kiwis. Because the Kiwis now, they've got a kind of mix and match for the halves combination. But the Kiwi Ferns, again, assuming the players make it through the NRLW finals unscathed, Tyler King, Racine McGregor, Gail Broughton, and Ash Quinlan are all starting halves in the NRL. So you got 4 starting halves right there to choose from. The Kiwis, we're kind of in a category where it's like, okay, if it's not Jerome Hughes and Sean Johnson, then it might be Jerome Hughes, Dejan Arce. It might be Jerome Hughes, Chanel Harris-Tavita. It might be Jerome Hughes, Kaio Weeks. It might be Jerome Hughes, Shans Nickel Kluckster. Like, there's just so many options, none of which feature a consistent starting half alongside Jerome Hughes. You know, it's just a very different situation, but that is to say the Kiwi Ferns have a fantastic group of players. And we do have NRLW finals coming up. Obviously, the NRL finals this week Storm versus Roosters, Panthers versus Sharks, NRLW finals. We got Broncos versus Sharks, Roosters versus Knights, all of which are full of players from Aotearoa, specifically the Sharks. So I want to put a spotlight on the Sharks to finish our rugby league discussion, because the Sharks are in the finals of NRL, NRLW, and New South Wales Cup and Jersey Flegg. Sorry for a brain fart there. So the Sharks are in 4 different finals campaigns. Personally, I think the best NRL teams are the Storm and the Panthers. No surprises there. And I don't know if the Sharks are going to progress in the NRL finals. And I have no change in my opinion of the Sharks after their win against the Cowboys. Like, I kind of think that's a game they should win. And then they come up against the Panthers. That's a game they probably should lose. But the Sharks NRL team, you've got Briton Nikora, fantastic edge forward. He's going to be your Kiwis edge forward, assuming he's available. KL Ido, we've talked about him before. He might be a Kiwis centre, but he's a pretty hearty Cook Islander, born and raised in the Cook Islands. One of the few NRL players who is born and raised in the Cook Islands. He did spend time in Auckland, though, as a Mount Albert junior. The Sharks, Ronaldo Mulitalo, he's from Otara, Ellerslie Eagles junior. The Cronulla Sharks woman, they've got Anessa Biddle at centre and Brooke Anderson, who's an Australian player who plays for the Kiwi Ferns, so shout out to her. Brooke Anderson's a lock forward in NRLW, but she is probably the best hooker available to the Kiwi Ferns. And Anessa Biddle's from Otara. So you got Ronaldo Mulitalo, he's from Otara, and Anessa Biddle is from Otara. So nice little Otara connection there for the Cronulla Sharks. If we get into New South Wales Cup, Braden Hamlin-Uele, he played for the Newtown Jets this weekend. They've got a grand final coming up, so curious to see if Hamlin-Uele plays NRL or New South Wales Cup. But he's there. The Jets also have Chris Viaila, who's a Waitemata junior. And he was initially recruited by the Newcastle Knights. But then the Sharks brought him down, and he's been playing for the Newtown Jets. Shout out to, and they've also got Mawene Hiroti, who is from New Plymouth. He's been in the Sharks system for a while. Fantastic clubman, just does any role the Sharks require. And so the Newtown Jets, who won their finals game last weekend, both centres are from Aotearoa. Chris Viaila and Mawene Hiroti. They've also got Jackson Ferris in the wider mix there. He is from Palmerston North, and he has also been in the Sharks system for a while. Just because I mentioned the Newcastle Knights, they did sign Francis Manulelua from the Panthers. And the Knights have a massive Kiwi NRL crew now boosted by Francis Manulelua, who's a Papatoetoe junior, went to King's College, and I believe Peter O'Sullivan was working at the Warriors when Manulelua was coming up through the Warriors before going to the Panthers. And Peter O'Sullivan, he was at the Dolphins, but he made a mid-season switch to go to the Knights. So he's known about Manulelua for a long time. So no surprises that he recruited Manulelua to the Knights, because what does Peter O'Sullivan love from Aotearoa? Or what does he love in general? He loves first 15 rugby in Aotearoa. The Dolphins, a lot of first 15 rugby players. And at the Knights now, he's got the Francis Manulelua connection. Most of these first 15 players did play rugby league, though. Okay, so the Knights are also in the Jersey Flegg Grand Final. And this is where things are a little bit more funky for the Cronulla Sharks, because their under-21 Jersey Flegg lads are all big boppers. Salisi Ata from Otahuhu, he's the starting prop usually. And then they have Felix Fa'atili coming off the bench. He's from Christchurch, Hornby Jr. Haven't seen as much of Richie Tupuaile, also from Christchurch, also a Hornby Jr. He didn't play last week and he's kind of been 18th man for a few games. But if you search Richie Tupuaile on YouTube or anywhere, there's a Rugby Pass clip of his first 15 highlights. I think he was playing for St. Thomas of Canterbury, actually, first 15. Let me make sure. Yes, yeah. So he was playing first 15 rugby union for St. Thomas of Canterbury, and now he's in the Sharks system. But St. Thomas of Canterbury are back-to-back rugby league champions in New Zealand. Richie Tupuaile's first 15 highlights from Rugby Pass are literally almost as impressive as Toby Crosby's. And that silence is for effect. But Richie Tupuaile hasn't played a whole lot for the Sharks. This was his first season in Cronulla, and he has had a few games for the Jersey Flegg team, but he's kind of been 18th man extended squad for most of the season. So I don't think we're going to see him play the grand final, but we should definitely have Salisi Ata and Felix Fa'atili. So we still got that Christchurch Hornby connection there with Fa'atili. And that is to say, the Cronulla Sharks, they're in NRL finals, NRLW finals, New South Wales Cup finals via the Newtown Jets, and Jersey Flegg under-21 finals. They're in all those finals, and they got Kiwis in all those teams. The NRL Ronaldo Mulitalo was already in Australia, so he's not directly from Aotearoa. Kale Iro, I think, had time with the Knights before going with the Sharks, so he's not directly from Aotearoa. Britton Nakora was in Queensland before going to the Sharks. So none of the NRL dudes are recruited directly from New Zealand. Anessa Biddle was recruited directly from New Zealand. Chris Viaila was from the Knights. And Felix Fa'atili was playing in Queensland before going down to the Sharks. So there's only a few of them who are recruited directly from New Zealand, specifically Anessa Biddle, Ata, and maybe Richie Tupuaile as well. So there's a few Kiwi-NRL Wahine players throughout those finals teams, and it's interesting to see how they have got there. And the Sharks have a fantastic system, evident in Sam Healey now being recruited by the Warriors, but there's definitely more Kiwi-NRL juniors, and there's also someone like Jadika Tafua, the sister of Micaiah Tafua. She is in the Sharks New South Wales Women's Premiership team, and there's a lot of Kiwi-NRL juniors in the SG Ball ranks as well there for the Sharks. So little Kiwi-NRL spotlight on the Sharks there. Very successful club and organisation, but they also have a strong relationship with Aotearoa, and I think that's only increasing. They seem to be doing a lot of good recruitment from New Zealand. And in the case of someone like Richie Tupuaile, they are willing to go outside the rugby league window to get those players that they want, most of whom are either big boppers or they're really, really powerful. So that's a pretty good recruitment theme for the Cronulla Sharks. Also evident in Anessa Biddle. So their woman recruitment or their female recruitment is pretty similar to the men's recruitment, because Anessa Biddle is an absolute monster in post-contact meters. And I'll finish up here because we've got finals footy coming up in NRLW, which means the end of the regular season, which means Anessa Biddle finished first for post-contact meters, 741. Next best, Alexis Taueniai from Wellington, 705 post-contact meters. So the only players with over 700 post-contact meters in NRLW this season, they're both under the age of 23, and they're both from Aotearoa. Let us enter the realms of football. which are otherwise known here in Aotearoa and the East Cache as the Forest of the Woodsman. And because he did what he does best, which is bang home a penalty for Nottingham Forest. Break down Chris Wood's excellence from the penalty spot and offer some context around what he's doing for Nottingham Forest at the moment.
Yeah, third goal of the season for him in just the fifth game. Nottingham Forest, who were pretty deep in a relegation battle last season, they are undefeated through 5 weeks of the Premier League season, which is pretty crazy. Like it's not the craziest Flying Kiwis turnaround because Libby Kakache has an even better one because his Empoli team last year, they lost their first 5 games in a row, lost all 5 of them and didn't score a single goal in any of those matches. They're also undefeated after 5 weeks of the Italian season. Difference is that Chris Wood's scoring goals in 3 out of 5 games for Nottingham Forest, whereas Libby Kakache is coming off the bench in all 5 games. Well, he's been on the bench in all 5 games, but he actually didn't play at all last week when they drew 0-0 with Juventus, which is another crazy result. Like they've already beaten Roma and drawn with Juventus during this turnaround. So, but he did get a little stint off the bench this week, Kakache, which was. I mention this because I mention it because the parallel with Chris Wood and Nottingham Forest just having completely contrasting starts to the season this year compared to last year. But also, weird thing with Kakache on the weekend is they subbed him on, but they didn't sub him on for the left back who he's usually vying for minutes with. They actually threw him on 2-0 up against Cagliari there near the end of quarter of an hour to go, a little bit more than that. They threw him on as a left winger. So we saw him in preseason, well, not preseason, in the first game of the season, which was a Coppa Italia early round game. He played as a centre back in a back 3. That was a little bit of a new one, but we haven't seen that again since then. However, we saw Libby Kakache on the weekend as a winger. He actually had a goal disallowed too. He managed to put a header over the line, which the defender cleared, but it was too deep in the thing. However, there was a pretty obvious offside earlier on in the build-up, so no one really celebrated. They kind of knew it was coming back, but. As far as I can tell, that's the third goal that Libby Kakache has had disallowed since he moved to Europe, and he hasn't scored a real one. So he's out there battling, waiting for that moment to actually. He's scored a few, but none of them have actually counted yet since he left the Wellington Phoenix. Chris Wood doesn't have that problem. Chris Wood scores goals every couple of weeks, and he's been really good to start the season for Nottingham Forest. He started every game, but also. He's especially ruthless from the penalty spot because the last time he missed a penalty, and I'm talking for club, I'm talking for country, I'm talking in normal games, and I'm talking in penalty shootouts as well. The last time he missed a penalty was in April 2016. He was still playing for Leeds. That was before his big breakout season. The next season was when he got Golden Boot in the Championship, and that led to his move to Burnley, and then he's been in the Premier League ever since, and the rest is history. He hasn't missed a penalty in any of that time. He's only missed 3 in his entire career, I think. Might be 4 if we're including shootouts, I think. But he's scored 28 in a row, 21 in a row in terms of just normal penalties, but also 7 in shootouts to take it out to 28 in a row if you count those. And credit here to Dale Warburton from the Yellow Fever because he spotted this on Twitter when I put up the gif of Chris Wood scoring the penalty. If you look in the background, Morgan Gibbs-White starts celebrating before Woods even kicked the ball. Like he's just, and it's not just like a psych out try to celebrate or wave your arms around, distract the goalkeeper or anything, because he doesn't change his reaction at all when the ball hits the back of the net. It's just like he was out of sync. He started celebrating a few seconds earlier. There's no change in focus or stance or anything. He just knew that ball was going to go in. And I guess because he probably practices penalties alongside Chris Wood and knows exactly how good he is from the spot, completely ruthless. He's never missed one for the national team as far as I can figure out. And yeah, they had a 1-1 draw against Brighton and Chris Wood scored. So it was all lovely stuff. This is actually the first time he's taken a penalty for Nottingham Forest, though. Hasn't as good as he is, he hasn't had that many opportunities lately. Forest just haven't been winning pens, and when they have, he's not been the guy to take them, or he's been off the pitch or whatever. They actually had a penalty shootout in the League Cup earlier this season. He had already been subbed off by then, though, so he didn't get to partake. So This was a nice nice and well. We don't really need an emphatic reminder, but this was that for Chris Wood with his penalty abilities. Mostly it was just an opportunity to update the numbers and say it's now 28 in a row instead of 27 in a row because it's been a little while. The last previous time he took a penalty was against Congo for the All Whites, which was the last minute equalizer. Obviously, he scored that one as well. He's just he just doesn't miss. I mean, one day he'll probably miss, so I don't want to jinx him or anything like that. But right now, he doesn't miss. And so until he does, we've got to savor this big old streak.
I wonder if Nottingham Forest fans know that they've got like a penalty taking legend in their team. Because they
Probably don't.
they don't know about the All Whites history, and they wouldn't really know too much about the uh previous teams he played, Burnley, Newcastle, those
Yeah, and
teams.
even Leeds and beyond
Leeds,
that,
yeah.
Leicester, he took some
Yeah.
penalties for them. Like, yeah, that's the thing is, I think even All Whites fans might not necessarily. I mean, you obviously, if the All Whites win a penalty, every casual knows Chris Wood's going to take it if he's on the field because he's the goal scorer, right? And he's the record goal scorer for the country. But I don't necessarily know that even All Whites fans would be aware of just how, unless they've been reading the niche cache, of course, just how like incredible his streak of penalty success has been because, as you say, he's done it for so many different teams. Like even when I talk about the national team, that includes there was a shootout at the previous Olympics, the 2021 Olympics. He scored in the shootout against Japan. Yeah, like there's instances like this. He's just done it, which I think, if anything, adds to the legend of it because these are all different environments, different situations. Like he scored penalties against Fiji, he scored penalties against it was Brighton and Hove Albion on the weekend. Like it's at the Olympics and the Premier League and the lower tiers in England. Like just wherever he's gone, whenever he's been asked to step up and take penalties, he scores them. At least since 2016 he has. Because I remember that one that he missed, and it was a bit of a comical one because he blasted it a mile over the bar. And I think he might have been dragged for that a little bit. So he was like, resolution, never going to miss another one. And he hasn't since.
Obviously, my mind isn't full of Chris Wood penalties, but I can't remember seeing one go in the top corner since you started really tapping into it. Seems like
Mm.
if you blast one over the top bar, you might be going low a few times after that.
I think he generally does, but I've also seen him go left, right, down the middle. Like he does mix it up. He's not just one of those guys who has the one type of penalty. This is the one that he takes until they figure it out and then he has to adjust. Like he obviously practices it. Like there's no way he's just this naturally good at it. I think he's just immensely well prepared for penalties. Unfortunately, when he played for Burnley, they had a long streak where they were like the only team one season who never won a penalty, and Nottingham Forest haven't been getting enough of them. So maybe if he played for I don't know, if he played for Manchester City or Arsenal or Liverpool or something at the moment, we'd have heard a lot more about it because he'd be taking a lot more penalties.
So we don't have any National League football, contrary to popular
Yeah,
belief
not yet anyway.
slash my belief. And I don't think there's any Wellington, Phoenix, Auckland FC news that we need to touch on. So I might just roll through some more flying Kiwis, throw them at you and see what you can conjure up. We had debuts for a few players. Indy Riley at Crystal Palace, Elijah Just in Austria, St. Polten, Kate Taylor Dijon FCO in France, Grace Wisniewski at Lexington SC in the USA. What did you make of those debuts?
Yeah, it was, you ended
Sorry,
on a
stressed it
question
out there.
mark there, or yes.
Well, I will
Um,
add, because we do have, you've got here in our newsletter, you've got Sarpreet Singh. He still seems to be out injured for UD Lieria. Finn Sermon's just staying on the bench for Portland, and Millie Clegg's just staying on the bench for Racing Louisville. So those are still coming up as well. But there are some players who've played their first games at new clubs. I'm just not sure how I
yeah,
wanted to throw it at you, but I'll just let you go take off.
Yeah, there's a few others as well. Like, along with Millie Clegg, there's three other players from the Under-20 World Cup. Chiara Brusselli, who's at Sampdoria, top flight in Italy. Olivia Page at Sheffield United, second division in England, and Suya Herring at Turbine Potsdam, top division in Germany. So there's some serious leagues there where these players have come back, and Millie Clegg, top division in America, come back from the Under-20 World Cup and are hoping to get some. Most of those European seasons have only just started. The American one is nearing its end. So I don't know. I mean, I'd really like it if they'd give Millie Clegg a debut sooner rather than later, but I don't know if that's necessarily something that's on the immediate cards as Racing Louisville challenge for trying to get into the playoffs. Similar story with Finn Surman as well, but I do have some quotes in the Flying Kiwis wrap this week from Phil Neville, his coach, specifically saying, we hope to get Finn Surman some minutes before the season is over. So he's on record. He's saying it's difficult because they got a lot of centre backs, and he's a bit more of the future idea of a centre back rather than the present idea of a centre back at the clubs. But he's on record as saying he wants to get him some game time. So hopefully that does happen. As the ones who did get game time, like Elijah Just, his one was his situation is a little weird because I think we've probably discussed this, how he went on loan, but loan probably leading to a permanent move to a second division club in Austria that doesn't seem likely that it's going to get promoted, that actually had not won any of their first 5 games. So it's a bit of a strange move, sideways at best, arguably even down from second division in Denmark. And he didn't do a whole lot off the bench on debut, but he was kind of their lucky charm because I said they hadn't won any of their 5 games. Well, they were 0-0 against whoever it was that they were playing this week. 0-0 after about 65 minutes. Elijah Just gets subbed on. Before he's touched the ball, they're 2-0 up and the opposition's got a red card. So a red card led to a free kick. They scored the free kick and then they scored straight after that as well. He still hadn't touched the ball and his team had scored twice and got the other team down to 10. There was the goalkeeper rushing out and just dropped a shoulder on a striker. And yeah, you're not allowed to do that. So lucky charm, Elijah Just helped his team to their first victory of the season without even having to really do much. He kind of played a bit on the right wing, bit on the left wing. Grace Wisniewski's debut was pretty cool for Lexington SC. They lost. They've not been great to start the season. She didn't play their first 3 games, but she's back now, having sort of, done the last phases of her recovery from her ACL injury. Came on in central midfield, defensive-minded midfield position, but with room to push forward because they were chasing goals. So that made everything quite transitional and a little bit chaotic. And most important thing to say about that is she was jumping into tackles like the Grace Wisniewski everyone remembers. No hesitation because of the long-term knee injury. Her first game since last November. Doesn't matter. 10 months later, she's just jumping around and wrecking folks. Kate Taylor's one was pretty interesting. Her debut in France because she was playing centre back, and she's always been a centre back up until the last 12 months where she suddenly became one of the A-League's better defensive midfielders, and then she's playing a lot of midfield for the football Ferns as well. And now she's back to centre back in France, which I don't know. I always got the feeling when she started playing there for the national team, it changed the situation a bit. But definitely when she started playing for the Phoenix, it sort of felt like this is a bit of a filling a need for the Phoenix rather than saying Kate Taylor is a long-term midfielder. And I kind of felt like this is something which it's a developmental step. Like you play in the midfield, you got to play with a bit more 360-degree awareness than you do at centre back. You got to your touch has got to be better under pressure. You got less time on the ball. You got to make more passes from tricky spots. I kind of just felt like that was just going to level her up to where she goes over to play in Europe, as already had felt inevitable, and then those skills become really helpful playing centre back at a higher level, which is what's happened. But we'll see what that looks like for the football Ferns, because I think she's still someone who gets into the team a lot. She might be a first 11 centre midfielder, but she probably wouldn't be a first 11 centre back. But she's playing centre back at a pretty high level now in France. So, but we'll let her season. She's played 1 game, so we'll let her season unfold. Solid enough performance there for a team that did try to keep a lot of ball, did try to build up from the back. So lots of touches, lots of passes. Most of them were good. probably needs to up the pass rate overall. There was one where they conceded a chance because she passed it to a striker, but that was a lone incident within a 90-minute performance. And who was the other one? Who was the other debutant? Who else were we talking about?
We had Kate Taylor, Wisniewski, Elijah Just, and India Page Riley at
India
Crystal
Riley.
Palace.
That's the one. Yeah, so that was cool because it's the top division in England. But there's really nothing to say other than that. She went straight into the Crystal Palace starting lineup. She played about 75 minutes as their right midfielder, right wing, and mostly just had to defend because Crystal Palace in their first game in the WSL after getting promoted got thrashed 4-0 by Spurs, who are sort of a mid-table WSL team as well. So they'll face much tougher games than that, and they got a rude awakening. So great to see India Riley straight in there. That was awesome. But the team performance needs a bit of work. So, but it was their first game at that level, so it was always going to be a bit of a tough one. But we did get CJ Bott also, who's definitely not on debut for Leicester City. First couple, which I think the third season now over there, something like that. And she was awesome for Leicester City. Like she was so good that I went and clipped a bunch of things of her doing defensive acts and chucked it up as a highlight clip because she's just so much fun to watch play at that level because she's up against some of the best wingers in the world and she's just like dropping shoulders and barging them over and like, just physically wrecking them. So great start to the season from CJ Bott there. And Elite is the other player in the WSL. She's at Aston Villa, but she didn't play this weekend. Sounds like she'll probably be the backup again at Aston Villa to the third season in a row for a third different goalkeeper, which is pretty annoying, but it's kind of irrelevant at the moment because she's out injured. She missed the last couple of weeks of preseason, wasn't fit for their first game of the season. So hopefully that's not too long of a thing because they will have, even if she's not the starter in the league, they will have cup games coming up, which she's likely to play instead. So I want to be fresh for those ones, you know.
How did the Rangers, I assume it's Hearts game, finish up with Vic Esson? Because you did clip out a fantastic save from Vic Esson. How did that game end up?
Rangers won 2-0.
Bang.
They've won all 7 games this season. They continue their perfect record in domestic footy. And yeah, Vic Esson had a couple nice highlights. There was that one, and there was also a save later on, which was deflected. And so she kind of fumbled it and managed to sort of almost do a forward roll in recovering it, but saved it well enough. It was a tricky one because it bounced right in front of her off the deflection. But yeah, in particular, that save off the free kick in the first half, while it was still 0-0, was massive because Rangers haven't really been threatened at all in the domestic front. But this is their first game against one of the other kind of challenging teams. Hearts are maybe a step below Celtic and Glasgow City, but they're hanging around. Like they're better than anyone else in the league beyond the 3 kind of title contenders. And that was a tough game. And Essen had played 4 games so far out of the 7. They rotate a little bit. 4 games out of the previous 6. And 3 of those she kept a clean sheet, didn't have to make a save in any of them. The 4th appearance she made, she also didn't have to make a save, but she didn't keep a clean sheet because she made a big mistake where she went to make a clearance and she kicked it into the striker and it bounced over her and into the goal. So,
the old Ben Waine.
Yeah, it's sort of, except it wasn't quite a falcon. It wasn't quite as cinematic as the Ben Waine one was, but very similar to that. And yeah, a bit of a mistake, one she would have wanted to make amends for, and then she did make amends for it with a very good performance with a couple of the first saves of the season, and a 5th appearance in the SWPL, Scottish Women's Premier League. Her 5th appearance, she finally had to make a save, and boy, did she make the saves, you know? It's did what needed to be done. So good stuff there.
So we got the Conway, we got the Ben Waine.
Yeah.
The Waine goal. Is it a good clean sheet for a goalkeeper if you don't touch the ball or you don't make a save?
I think it's a good clean sheet for the defense when the goalkeeper doesn't have to make a save. I don't think it really... the stat goes towards the goalkeeper, but you didn't really do anything. You know, you kind of just... Maybe, I mean, some more than others. If you listen closely to that clip of Essen making the free kick save, at the very start, you can hear her yelling at her teammates to organise them a bit. So you might get that from the goalie. You know, it's... They don't make any saves, but they're good in possession. They pass the ball around nicely. They organize things vocally. You know, can still be nicely involved, but Rangers were winning some of those games like 8-0, 10-0. So no, that wasn't really wasn't really one that had to reflect on her. That's why it was good to see her get a moment against Hearts.
Beauty. That is us for today. That's the Niche Cast, and we will be back on Thursday with another bumper bonus subscriber podcast. Somehow we'll chat even more Blackcaps cricket and anything else that pops up on the radar as well. So stay tuned for that. If you're on Patreon or you got a paid Substack subscription, hit us up. Any comments, questions, queries, let us know. Otherwise, big up yourself, love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, church.